Every year, nearly 10 to 30 million commercial flights occur globally, and the chances that you've flown on a plane at least once within your life is very high. You also probably don't realize that flying is one of, if not the safest mode of transportation, and that's thanks to all the engineers, manufacturers, and government-issued safety standards that go into place to make flying safe and at least somewhat affordable. So obviously, planes are pretty cool, and there are many people who strive to be pilots or just have a general love for aviation and the engineering that goes into it. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those people, and the only reason I chose aerospace engineering as my major was just because I wanted a stable living. But damn it, if you don't learn to love something by spending 12 to 14 hours a day for 3 years talking about only that, I don't know what will. Some people just have a natural tendency for it, like this lovely individual here, who watched an old, really horrible quality video about stealth planes I made on this channel. Thank you very much, by the way. And in honor of him, I wanted to make a more high quality, in-depth video, since today's me has a lot more knowledge on it than younger me. So come with me and let's go over some basic topics and fun facts that go into aviation and aircraft. But of course, before we begin, please make sure to like and subscribe, as that would mean a lot to me. There are a lot of fundamental things that are learned before you ever even talk about an airplane, such as statics and dynamics, but the most essential is fluids. A fluid, by definition, is a substance that deforms continuously under shear stress. Liquids and gases fall into the category of fluids, and the property of fluids is actually the driving mechanism for what makes planes fly. We equate the properties of the fluids from one state to another with the Bernoulli equation, at least for very simplistic ideal flows with no extra energy added to the system. This equation itself is actually more complex than it looks, because this is only for incompressible flows, but for compressed airs, the properties of fluids like density can change with location and even time, so a gradient of this formula also exists, and solving it is much more difficult. There are also other ways of calculating different values for fluids, such as how much force it applies when flowing through a system using control volumes and control surfaces, but that's too in-depth and unnecessary for a brief overview. But looking back at the Bernoulli equation, we see that the two sides must be equal to each other. So if constants on one side remain constant and one value is changed on the other side of the equation, another must be changed on the same side in order to compensate. For example, if we increase the speed on this side, something must decrease on this same side to make it equal, in this case being pressure. This change in pressure is actually what we want when we want to create lift for an airplane to fly. Controlling the speed of the airflow over and under the wing, we can control the pressure, and if the pressure is greater under the wing than over it, then there's more force pushing it upwards, and this creates lift. This concept applies for both subsonic and supersonic flight, although for supersonic flight, we take into account the change in pressure due to shock waves. So how do we control the speed of airflow around an object? Well, we do this with airfoils, which are aerodynamic. There are many different shapes of airfoils, but the best shape for easy conceptual learning is an infinitely thin flat plate. Adjusting the angle of attack for a flat plate, we see that the airflow must go around and over the flat plate in order to reach the back tip. We call this the Kutta condition. Since the top flow needs to travel a further distance in the same amount of time to both leave from the trailing edge, it makes sense that the top flow must be faster and therefore have a decrease in pressure compared to the bottom flow, allowing for that desired pressure difference. Now, very rarely do we deal with the actual values of pressure, lift, and whatnot in aerospace engineering, but more so we deal with the coefficients, which are non-dimensionalized, so that we can relate how a prototype will work to how the real thing would work. We can look at many different lift curve slopes for different NACA airfoils, and we see that each airfoil type has their own different slopes, max lift coefficient, different angles of attack for stall, and whatnot. We can also see their drag coefficients, but we won't talk too much about drag because drag has a lot to do with form drag, which is the shape of the object, and friction drag, which has to do with viscosity and Navier-Stokes equation, and it just sucks. So just leave it alone for now. But keep in mind that an airfoil is not a wing. An airfoil is two-dimensional and just the cross-sectional shape of the wing at any point. And since wings usually change their shape from the root, then the airfoil changes along the wing as well. So when we do look at the wings, we already know it is the accumulation of all the airfoils one after the other composing the entire wing. So to find the properties of the wing, such as lift or drag of the entire wing, what we have to do is integrate the properties of the airfoils along the wing to find the values for the wing itself. So there are simplistic formulas to calculate the lift and drag of an airplane at different speeds, altitudes, or whatever, but what we need are these lift and drag coefficients. These coefficients are solved either experimentally through prototypes, which is an expensive endeavor, or through computation since the mathematics cannot be done by hand. There are other ways to solve a simple wing design by hand, but there are a lot of assumptions needed to be made, such as having an elliptical planform shape, which obviously isn't true of all wings. Most of the computational methods for solving for these wing coefficients that include not only the wings but the effects of the horizontal and vertical stabilizers are paid for by companies who have already made them. But the most simplistic computational methods I learned in college for incompressible flows are the lifting line method and the vortex sheet method, which have their own strengths and weaknesses, especially when compared to professional softwares that are obviously super powerful and give high accuracies for real-world expectations. Now, as we see, not all airplanes are built the same, and we see the biggest differences between commercial planes and military planes. Commercial planes are bigger, longer, and have more thickness, than that of the military planes, which have shorter, swept, and perhaps even delta wings, which are very thin. The differences for these structure types is due to functionality and what the jobs for these airplanes are. The wings for commercial planes are built for functionality and high efficiency, kind of like a car that is built to get more miles per gallon. They aren't meant to fly super fast, they are meant to get from location to location, usually from large distances, with a lot of weight of passengers and luggage with the least amount of fuel possible. Fighter and stealth planes, however, have a totally different goal. They are built for speed, maneuverability, and stealth. Due to the designs of these planes, they are obviously more difficult to fly, and they also eat through fuel very quickly, but they aren't meant to fly for long periods of time. They are meant to take off and land in a short period of time and not really go far distances like commercial planes. The reason for the thin wings and the thin fuselage is due to their requirements for stealth and avoiding radar. How radar works is that it shoots a wave in all directions, and when it collides with an object, those waves bounce off the object and return. When they return, the incoming waves are red, which indicates it bounced off an object, therefore something is there, and now you're on the radar. So if a big ass commercial airplane were to fly into monitored airspace, that round fuselage would bounce back so many of those waves, they'd be seen instantly on the radar. However, a stealth plane with a very thin and angled wings and fuselage obviously has a smaller area which can bounce back the waves. But also that angle deflects a lot of those waves rather than having it bounce back. We discussed the infinitely thin flat plate airfoils earlier, but obviously that's not possible in the real world because if it was infinitely thin, it would have no structural integrity, but engineers aim to make them as thin as they possibly can. Also, the material that makes the outer coating of these stealth planes also have the property of absorbing these waves, reducing the chances of waves bouncing back. That's really all I have for you today with what I have learned so far. This is the bare bones basics of things I've learned during my time in college. Of course, I've avoided heavy mathematics and other more very intricate details, but there's just no way to explain all this stuff in like 10 minutes. But if you did enjoy, please make sure to like and subscribe as this did take a lot of work and it would mean a lot to me. If you'd like to see any other airspace topics or physics topics, since those are the two majors I am in, let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk about it. With all that out the way, I hope you all have a great day and peace out.